Have you ever wondered why people who worked 40 years, day after day, paycheck after paycheck, still find themselves lying awake at night, worried about money in retirement? It's a strange paradox, isn't it? We were handed a story, polished and repeated like gospel. Work hard, save diligently, buy a house, and by 65, you'll finally exhale and enjoy the golden years. But for millions of Americans, that story doesn't end with peace. It ends with anxiety. It ends with bills piling higher than pensions. It ends with fear that outlives the paycheck. I've seen it too many times. Let me tell you about John. John isn't a reckless man. He's the definition of the American middle class. He did what the system told him to do. He studied. He worked at the same company for decades. He put money into his 401k, and he paid his taxes. He and his wife skipped vacations so they could pay off the mortgage. They believed in the promise. And yet when John retired, the math betrayed him. Rising healthcare costs swallowed his savings. Inflation turned his nest egg into something fragile. And the so-called golden years? They looked more like years of careful rationing, counting pennies, wondering if the money would last longer than his health. I was born and raised in America. I believed that story once too. I worked, I climbed, I followed the script. But life, and perhaps wisdom, taught me a bitter truth. The promise was never designed for people like John, or like you, or like me. The system was built on an old world that no longer exists. And so here we sit, in this quiet corner of a noisy coffee shop, peeling back the curtain on a lie that shaped generations. Now let's take a closer look at the machine that chewed John up. Because John didn't fail. The system did. And it's a system built for a world that no longer exists. The old retirement model was simple: pensions, Social Security, and savings. That was the tripod holding up the golden years. It worked. For a while. But here's the catch. That structure was built in the middle of the 20th century, when America was different. Companies were loyal, life expectancy was shorter, and the cost of living was manageable. It was a deal that fit its time. Fast forward to today, and the tripod is wobbling. One leg, pensions, is nearly gone. In the 1980s, about half of private sector workers had pensions. Today, less than 15%. Companies traded them for 401ks, handing the risk from corporations to individuals. Imagine telling a factory worker or a teacher, "Congratulations, you're now your own fund manager." It was the great retirement handoff, but nobody told John how much the game had changed. The second leg, Social Security, was never designed to carry the full weight of retirement. It was supposed to be a supplement. And yet for millions, it's now the main course. Problem is, those checks don't stretch like they used to. Inflation keeps rising, medical bills keep climbing, and Social Security limps along, trying to do a job it was never meant to do. Then there's savings, the third leg. And this one's the cruelest. The average 401k balance for Americans approaching retirement is around $112,000. Think about that. Spread over 20 to 30 years of retirement, that's barely enough to cover basic expenses, let alone the curveballs life throws, like a sudden surgery or long-term care. So what do we have? A model built for 1950 still being sold as gospel in 2025. A promise that if you grind now, you'll live later. But later is collapsing under the weight of costs and broken promises. And here's where it gets darker. Longevity is supposed to be a blessing. We're living longer than ever. But when healthcare costs skyrocket alongside it, longevity becomes a financial curse. The average couple in retirement will need over $315,000 just to cover medical expenses, not luxuries, not vacations, just staying alive. Now add in the volatility of the markets. John's 401k, the supposed nest egg, moves up and down like a roller coaster he never bought a ticket for. One bad recession can slice off years of careful saving. The cruel irony? The very system that promised stability is tied to one of the most unstable forces in our economy. And while the numbers tell one story, the brain tells another. Neuroscience shows us that chronic financial stress doesn't just empty your wallet, it scrambles your mind. Under constant money pressure, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational decision-making, goes dim. Fear and scarcity take the wheel. That's why so many retirees cling desperately to what little they have, terrified to spend, terrified to live. Retirement becomes not a reward, but a prison built from uncertainty. And all of this traces back to the cultural lie. The American dream whispered, "Work hard now, enjoy later." It sounded noble, it sounded fair, but in practice, it became a lifetime of deferred living. People spent decades grinding away, only to discover that later was rigged, and the reward never came. This isn't just John's story. It's the story of millions of Americans, teachers, nurses, factory workers, even white-collar professionals who did everything right. The lie was bigger than all of them. So let's strip away the nostalgia. The 20th century model isn't coming back. Companies won't suddenly bring back pensions. Healthcare costs won't magically plummet. Social Security won't stretch enough to cover 3 decades of life. That's the breakdown. The system is broken, and no amount of wishful thinking will glue it back together. But here's the good news. Broken systems don't mean broken people. When the rules no longer work, it's not the end. It's the beginning of something new, which leads us to the next step. If the American dream's script no longer serves us, maybe the real wisdom is to rewrite it. To see the problem not as a dead end, but as an invitation to a new way of thinking about money, freedom, and security. Now here's the twist most people never stop to consider. Retirement was never meant to be about quitting life. It was meant to be about reclaiming it. Think about the way we've been taught to view work. From the time we're teenagers, the script is drilled into us. Work hard, keep your head down, grind for 40 years, and one day, one magical day, you'll be free. It's like we're told to treat work as a prison sentence, where the parole date is stamped on our 65th birthday. But here's the secret. Freedom doesn't begin when your boss hands you a gold watch. It begins the day you stop treating work as a cage. Retirement, in its truest sense, isn't about stopping work. It's about gaining control of time. Let that settle in. It's not about the absence of effort. It's about the presence of choice. See, when you shift the lens, everything changes. Instead of imagining work as this endless punishment, start seeing it as a platform. Your skills, your experience, your creativity, they're not things that get drained like a gas tank. They're renewable assets. They grow sharper when you use them wisely. They expand when you invest in them. And unlike the stock market, nobody can strip them from you. The old model told John, and millions like him, that life was split in 2 halves, the first half where you labor, the second half where you supposedly enjoy. But that split is a lie. Life isn't lived in halves. It's lived in seasons. And in every season, the question isn't, how soon can I stop working? The real question is, how free am I in the way I spend my time? Some folks imagine retirement as an endless beach vacation, a life of leisure 24/7. But you and I both know that's a fantasy. Humans aren't built for idleness. We crave purpose. We want contribution. That's why so many retirees who hit that mythical finish line end up restless, even depressed. They thought retirement meant endless freedom. What they got was endless boredom. Here's the real definition. Retirement is freedom of choice. The freedom to decide whether you want to work or not. The freedom to wake up and choose your day, not have it dictated by a paycheck you can't afford to lose. It might mean consulting part-time. It might mean building something of your own. It might mean mentoring younger generations or volunteering your time. It's not about zero work. It's about meaningful work, on your terms. And that's why I tell people, it's not about the day you stop working. It's about the day you stop being trapped. This shift in perspective is critical because it rewrites the story. Instead of chasing some mythical age where life begins, you start asking, how can I create freedom now? How can I shape my skills, my money, my time so that I have choices? Not decades from now, but this year, this decade. Once you see it this way, you stop being a victim of the system, and you start becoming a designer of your life. You stop playing by rules written for the 1950s, and you start writing your own playbook for 2025 and beyond. Now, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds good, but it feels abstract. How do you actually build this kind of freedom? How do you move from theory to practice, from philosophy to steps you can take on a Monday morning? That's where we turn next. Because reframing the problem is powerful, but reframing without action is just daydreaming. Let's break it down into concrete, actionable steps, practical moves that can help you build not just retirement wealth, but retirement freedom. At this point, it's not enough to nod in agreement, sip your coffee, and sigh about how broken the system is. Life doesn't pay you for sighs. It rewards shifts, small, deliberate pivots that compound over time. If the old model is broken, you can't afford to keep playing by its rules. You need a toolkit that's built for today, not your grandparents' yesterday. Let me give you 4 practical shifts I've seen change lives, not just in theory, but in blood, sweat, and lived stories. 1. Multiple income streams. The 9-to-5 job was never designed to be your savior. It was a truce. You give your time, you get a paycheck. But when that paycheck stops or gets disrupted, what's left? This is why you need to build income streams that don't rely on a single employer's promise. No, I'm not talking about chasing every shiny side hustle on TikTok. I mean cultivating sustainable alternatives, a rental property, an online store, a consulting gig, or dividends from investments. When one stream slows, the others keep flowing. It's not about greed, it's about resilience. The people who sleep best at night aren't those with the biggest salaries, but those who know a single storm won't drown them. 2. Invest in skills, not just stocks. Stocks rise and fall, skills compound. Skills don't crash, they evolve. A man who can code, teach, sell, or design will never truly be retired unless he chooses to be. Too many people pour everything into their 401k, but never bother to upgrade themselves. Then one day they find their job obsolete, their confidence wrecked, and their nest egg bleeding. But imagine if you treated your skills the same way you treat your portfolio, contributing regularly, diversifying, reinvesting. 10 years of steady skill growth can generate more freedom than 10 years of passive investing, especially in a world that rewards adaptability more than loyalty. 3. Rethink retirement age. 65 is an arbitrary number, a bureaucratic invention, not a universal truth. The body doesn't magically collapse at 65, nor does the soul suddenly want to sit quietly on a porch swing forever. You don't need to be bound to that finish line. Some of the happiest people I know didn't retire. They reshaped. A teacher became a part-time tutor. An engineer transitioned into consulting. A nurse started writing a blog about health and aging. They traded rigid schedules for flexible ones, heavy demands for lighter ones. Retirement doesn't have to be a full stop. It can be a recalibration. 4. Redefine success. We've been taught to chase a magic number. 2 million, 1 million, 5 million, pick your guru. But that's a mirage. Inflation changes, life changes, people change. The real measure of success isn't a fixed sum in your account. It's how much control and flexibility you have over your time. I've seen people with $500,000 live freer than those with 5 million, because the first group built lean, adaptable lives, while the second chained themselves to lifestyles they couldn't afford to relax into. Success isn't the size of your pot, it's the resilience of your fire. Now I will show you some case studies, proof in flesh and bone. Take Margaret, a high school art teacher. For decades, she taught kids how to sketch and sculpt. But around her late 50s, she started selling her pottery on Etsy. At first, it was coffee money. By the time she retired from teaching, that hobby was bringing in enough to cover groceries and utilities. She didn't panic about her modest pension or her thin 401k. She had built a bridge of her own making. Or Michael, a software engineer who thought he'd hang it up at 65. The truth? He got bored. Instead of fading out, he picked up part-time freelancing. Not only did it pad his income, it kept his mind sharp and his network alive. Retirement wasn't an ending. It was a remix. Both stories prove the same point. Retirement is not about the absence of work, but the presence of choice. So here's the truth. No financial planner will say this plainly. You don't need a magic formula. You need a mindset and a handful of practical levers you can actually pull. The old model said, grind, save, hope. The new model says, adapt, create, sustain. And if you're still with me, sipping that coffee and wondering what this means for you, then it's time we move from the tactical to the soul level. Because money and strategy are tools, but without reflection, they turn into shackles. Let's step back, breathe, and look at the bigger picture, the reflection that ties it all together. We were told a simple story. Work hard, save up, retire happy. That was the promise. But if you've lived long enough in this country, as I have, you know promises have a way of unraveling once you hold them up to the light. Happiness doesn't arrive on your 65th birthday like a government-issued package. It doesn't come in the mail with your Social Security check. Happiness comes earlier or later, depending on one thing: whether you've reclaimed control of your time, your money, and your choices. The truth is, retirement isn't an age. It isn't a number in a savings account. It's not even a gold watch at the office party. Retirement is a state of freedom, and freedom begins the moment you stop believing the old lie. Some of you might be 25, reading this on a cracked iPhone, sipping burnt coffee, wondering why life feels like a treadmill. Others might be 55, glancing at their retirement statements with a knot in the stomach. And still others are 70, realizing the world still expects them to be useful. Wherever you stand, know this: you don't have to wait for permission to live free. You don't need to wait for someday. The day you begin to see work as a tool instead of a trap, the day you begin to invest in yourself instead of only in the market, the day you stop tying your worth to a number on a statement, that's the day you've retired in the truest sense. That's the day you've stepped into freedom. And here's the twist: freedom isn't flashy. It doesn't announce itself with balloons or champagne. It arrives quietly, like morning light slipping through the blinds. You notice it when you turn down a project you don't need, when you take a walk in the middle of the day without guilt, when you say yes because you want to, not because you must. That's retirement. That's the dream redefined. So as we close, let me leave you with this thought. Retirement isn't about stopping. It's about reclaiming, and freedom begins the moment you stop believing the old lie. And if this stirred something in you, if it made you tilt your head and think about your future differently, then I invite you to step further onto the bridge. Welcome to the bridge within, where stories unlock the hidden connections between who we are and who we can become. Every video is a journey across that inner bridge we all share, between logic and intuition, struggle and growth, knowledge and action. If you're ready to uncover insights that connect the mind, heart, and world around you, hit subscribe and start crossing the bridge within today. And before you go, share your story below. What did you learn about money that school never taught you? Because when we share, we don't just build wealth, we build bridges.